Okay. So everybody's not, is not supposed to pick your teeth now. You're not, you have to behave a little bit better. Margaret, is that an A-frame in your background? And is that a screensaver, or is that where you're living? Miss Perkinson?
I wish it were where I'm living. It's a screensaver,
Okay.
but everyone's always curious about it. So, yeah.
For the recording's sake, I just reviewed how I always start every talk, which is I call the limbo. I've actually created a tape about it that I can show a kind of short video of what I mean when I say limbo. By that, before you listen to a talk that has the potential to change your mind and uplift your heart and benefit others, you thank your lineage and you set your intention and motivation. So that being said, we're going to proceed now. Hi, Jessica. So I want to start with a word called tendril, which is a Tibetan word that means auspicious coincidence, or that's at least one of the translations I've heard of it. And it also sometimes could be translated as ordinary magic. And the reason I want to do this is to kind of give us a sense of the ordinary magic that brings us to any one moment in life, but particularly moments in life where a vision is in place to try to benefit the planet. So by chance, this very unassuming man who should have retired gets the bright idea of trying to affect the entire state of Hawaii through the practice of mindfulness. Pretty nuts. And then by chance, this vision or this statement was read by a number of people who shared his vision and wanted to join in on this endeavor. And by chance, another man has a vision some 70 years earlier that he's going to come to the West, and after establishing, and he's going to teach Western Dharma students, and that his true mission is to create an enlightened society. And then by chance, in 1976, after this gentleman has been in the West for 10 years, he started to receive what's known as terma, or sacred teachings from a celestial source, a heaven, and in this case, from the kingdom of Shambhala itself. And then by chance, he writes a book about this. And then by another chance, 20 years earlier, a guy and a gal, students of this man who wrote these teachings down, this terma discovery, start a center in Hawaii. And then by chance, the original guy who's had this vision reads this book and says, my gosh, this could be a template of how we could go about and train in order to go forward with our vision and mission and hopes of creating, as Barack Obama said, a better union or a place of aloha in Hawaii. And by chance, you have heard this, and by chance you're here. And all of that in Tibetan is called tendril, or auspicious coincidence. So I want to kind of frame this about, I guess, just flat out how magical and what we might see as ordinary actually has threads that come to us from very distant places. And the invitations to be here is one of auspiciousness. So I just wanted to start with that. The next place I want to go is, if I was to ask you, who out there, and I guess it's kind of a throwaway question, but who out there is motivated with the intention of trying to make this a better place to live? Raise your hands. Who would like to see this be a more equitable, safe, loving place to live on the planet? And who, and I think it's okay to make these statements, who also wishes that they could like themselves more, be kinder to others, be more compassionate, serve others, and just be more skillful in all those endeavors? Raise your hand. So in some sense, what I'm saying there, I guess, is that is the basic vision of some Shambhala altogether, that we as humans have that motivation to help our planet and help others. It's the surfacing of this vision of goodness, that you are inherently pure, alive, awake, and wanting to help. So in some sense, we are already signed up, you could say, for the vision of Shambhala, or for the teachings about how to create something better. It's a yearning in us. Now, I'm going to ask you, because you've taken some stance to that, but what does it take, both inside yourself and theoretically, you might say, just please pop this out. What qualities would it take to get to you yourself and to affect the change in the world that we're talking about? Just say some adjectives, please.
Courage.
What qualities does it take would it take to do this vision that we just mutually had? Both in,
Compassion.
huh?
Compassion.
Who was that? Nice, Jay. Thanks for starting out. Yeah, not a plant, you guys. She actually said,
And Jerome also shared courage.
okay, courage, compassion,
Kindness.
kindness. Who is that? Nice, Richard. Welcome.
Richard,
Good
yeah.
to see you, Richard. Kindness, compassion, courage. Come on, Papa.
Selflessness.
Who is that?
Selflessness.
You're 2 for 2, Janine.
How about strength?
Strength, that's a good one. Like, could we go strength? Could we go with discipline? Who did that one? Come on, get your I don't want to do this alone. Get your mics off. Who said strength?
That was me, Jessica.
All right, nice. Strength. I'm gonna go-
Awareness.
Awareness, that's, yeah, okay, seeing the picture, right? Seeing the bigger picture, seeing where you're going. Go
I would
ahead.
add exertion.
Oh,
Yeah.
good one. Good
Yeah,
one.
good one. Not much gonna happen without exertion.
Yeah.
Perseverance. Like you
Mm.
reminded me.
That's a great one,
And
perseverance.
along with that, I would say patience.
Yeah.
Along with that would be patience.
How about
Vision, I got vision for awareness. How about the service, selflessness? Was that Janine?
Yeah.
How about hope?
Hope. Yeah, I think you gotta have hope, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good.
Teamwork?
That's beautiful. Teamwork, community. Right.
Wisdom.
Teamwork or a team, right? Who is back there now? Who said something else?
Hey,
Liz,
good.
I want to thank you very much for popping in, because
Liz said wisdom.
wisdom was said.
Liz.
Liz. So Trungpa Rinpoche said, if you put all those words together, and obviously I'm fishing a little bit, and but I needed to address this straight on, because he was a lover of language. He himself was a poet, a genius on so many levels, but one of the things he displayed was his poetry. And he loved language. He loved the English language. And so he had this word called poa in Tibetan that he was getting said to him, and it somewhat translates, he who is brave, she who is brave, she who contains all these adjectives, brave, courageous, selfless, compassion, kindness, awake, teamwork, selflessness, devotion, discipline, exertion, vision, all the ones that we just came up with. And he said that the best word for that was spiritual warrior. So he came up with the term warrior because it took bravery, because it took courage, because it took selflessness, because it took devotion, because it took discipline, because it took exertion to not only face yourself, but also to try to manifest this and see if you can change the world. So I want to go into that word a little bit more because I know it's one that has reverberations in our culture that's a little different. And again, we're talking about the spiritual warrior, and I want to go over to Haviv's here. And I dog-eared this particular poem for my friend Richard. And it's a poem from, this is a pretty worn out book, but this is Haviv's, the great Sufi poet who most folks know his work. So I thought of Richard on this one because I know he has talked to me about struggling with that particular word on occasion. It is a naive man who thinks we are not engaged in a fierce battle. For I see and hear brave foot soldiers going mad all around me. Falling on the ground in excruciating pain, you could become a victorious horseman and carry your heart through this world like a life-giving sun, though only if you and God become sweet lovers. So and in the Bhagavad-Gita, has anybody read the Bhagavad-Gita? Do people know the Bhagavad-Gita, one of the source books for the Vedic traditions altogether? Beautiful, epic poem and story about Krishna and Arjuna meeting on a battlefield. So it is not unusual to have the spiritual journey be likened to a battle that one has within one's own mind, and the battle one has with one's own self-absorption, and the battle one has in terms of what it takes, the courage and bravery it takes to open one's heart. I'm going to read a quote from somebody who defines spiritual warriorship, that this is a person who challenges the dreams of fears, lies, false beliefs, and judgment that create suffering and unhappiness in his or her life. It is a war that takes place in the heart and mind of a man or woman. The quest of the spiritual warrior is the same as spiritual seekers around the world. The spiritual warrior faces this challenge with the clarity and awareness that this war is fought within himself, herself, and that truth and unconditional love are on the other side of these battles. This is the ultimate quest for personal freedom and self-sovereignty. So I wanted to just take that word on because the book is called Shambhala, the Sacred Path of the Warrior. And as I said, there's a couple of there's more than one edgy word that Trungpa Rinpoche, he liked edgy things altogether sometimes. He made you work to figure out what he was saying. So I want to go into some of his quotes on warriorship. Anybody have anything to add? Anybody want to jump in?
I wanted to ask a question, if it's okay, Dean.
Yes, where are you?
I'm Jenny. I'm not sure because the pictures are different on everybody's screen. I'm right here. Who was the previous, the definition of the spiritual warriorship? Who were you quoting there?
You know what? I hate to say that. And it's a good question, but I'm afraid that one did not come. It was one of those popped up quotes that didn't come with any author.
Sounded a lot like Margaret Wheatley. Sorry to interrupt you. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Hi, Dean.
Hi,
Dean?
hi, Richard. How are you?
Good. How you doing?
Yes, I'm good. I mean,
I know only one line from the Bhagavad-Gita, which I get from Anthony DeMello, where
Yeah.
Lord Krishna says to Arjuna, plunge into the heat of battle and keep your heart at the lotus feet of the Lord.
Not bad, man. Way to come up with it, Richard. Beautiful.
It's the only one I know, Dee.
Well,
Good one.
you used it at the right time, Richard, so you did good. Okay, so this is from Trungpa Rinpoche from Shambhala. The term warrior relates to the basic situation of being a human being. The heart of the warrior is a basic aliveness or basic goodness. Such fearlessness and such goodness is free from doubt and overcomes any perverted attitudes towards reality. In the warrior tradition, sacred outlet is a brilliant environment created by basic goodness. When we refuse to have any contact with that state of being, when we turn away from basic goodness, then wrong beliefs arise. We come up with all sorts of logics again and again so that we don't have to face the realities of life. Warriorship is so tender, without skin, without tissue, naked and raw. It is soft and gentle. You have renounced putting on a new suit of armor. You have now renounced growing a thick, hard skin. You are willing to expose naked flesh, bone, and marrow to the world. To be a spiritual warrior, one must have a broken heart, for without a broken heart and the sense of tenderness and vulnerability, your warriorship is untrustworthy. These are from different excerpts. They're not one after another. I just pulled them up online. Actually, I literally, searched Trungpa Rinpoche and warriorship. He said, real fearlessness is the product of tenderness. It comes from letting the world tickle your heart, your raw and beautiful heart. You are willing to open up without resistance or shyness and face the world. You are willing to share your heart with others. And although the warrior's life is dedicated to helping others, that he realizes he or she will never be able to completely share his or her experience with others. Yet he is more and more in love with the world. By renouncing his private world, the warrior discovers a greater universe and a fuller and fuller broken heart. That's not something to feel bad about. It is cause for rejoicing. Further, he says, when human beings lose their connection to nature, to heaven and earth, then they do not know how to nurture their environment or how to rule their world, which is saying the same things. Human beings destroy their ecology at the same time that they destroy one another. From that perspective, healing our society goes hand in hand with healing our personal elemental connections with this phenomenal world. I love these last two. He says, the essence of warriorship, or the essence of human bravery, is refusing to give up on anyone or anything. And actually, Trungpa Rinpoche did visit Hawaii, and I don't know if this was written here, but he said, in the garden of your gentle sanity, may you be bombarded by coconuts of wakefulness.
That's good.
He had a great sense of humor.
Coconuts of wakefulness.
Yeah, coconuts, may you be bombarded by coconuts of wakefulness. Yeah.
Mm.
So I now kind of want to undermine that a little bit about, again, we take a lot of things for granted. I guess we see our lives sometimes as a little bit too mundane and not full of the ordinary magic that I kind of started the whole program with, which was this tendril, this sense of how auspicious our lives are. So I know this guy. He's 78 years old, and he's retired after being in community and political service for his entire life. He writes that he would like to quietly think about existence, the evolution of consciousness, and the future of communities. That's what he writes, what he wants to do with his retirement. But instead, this guy goes and starts a organization whose vision it is to actually change Hawaii. So in my opinion, Jimmy Toyama, you are a warrior. You are a spiritual Shambhala warrior. And I know of and have met and like and have a beautiful friendship and mutual respect with a Malibu beach girl whose last name was Zen, and she got teased about her name. She said, you know, they teased her constantly. Are you Buddhist or what? And she got teased so much that she finally found out about Buddhism and became ordained in 1977. As of now, she has dedicated her life to the education of Himalayan women, and she is probably one of the most foremost voices in the upliftedness of nuns in the Tibetan and Himalaya region. So to me, Karma Lecture Somo, you are a spiritual warrior. And I know this guy who's devoted his life to helping the mental health of people for, I think, 30 some years. And in his spare time, he leads volunteer groups on the upliftedness of this other, I believe he was a Catholic gentleman named Domelo. He volunteers for prison work and has done so for 8 years. He's on the board of many nonprofits. He's taught mindfulness-based stress reduction for over 20 years, and he's an amazing guy.
Thank you, Dean.
So,
Dean, this is the only board I'm on.
so Richard, to me, you are a Shambhala warrior.
Okay.
And I could go on and talk about Shirley Rivera, who not only in her professional life and after her retirement has based her entire life on teaching kindness and communication skills to children. To me, she's a spiritual warrior. I could go on and talk about an archaeologist who's in our midst, who's respected professionally. She had more credits to her name than I could print. And she goes over and takes over an organization out of love and devotion called Shambhala here in Kailua. And Arlene, the tag fits. And I could talk about a woman who is up for an award, a kind of a Guinness Book of Records award from a place called Atish to Heaven. It's a mythological, that she has moved more meditation sessions and taught more free classes than virtually anybody I know. I've watched her say prayers for the world for months on end in 38 degrees temperature. So Janine, you're a warrior. And I could talk about Roger Epstein. I've gone to, every time I'm at a nonprofit or a fundraiser, I run into my Roger Epstein, and I've finally decided I better get to know the guy. He's devoted his life. He's probably created more nonprofits for no money than any other person in Hawaii. So Roger Epstein, you're a Shambhala spiritual warrior. So I guess what I'm trying to say, if the shoe fits, wear it with pride. We've all have great intentions and we may all fail in many ways, but the word warrior fits with virtually everybody on this screen and with everybody involved in this community. I just returned from a retreat. What I'm trying to say is I'm fairly raw myself, kind of getting my footing back in the real world. And now I'm going to move into talking. It's going to take a lot of objectivity. I've got to back up, and the Jay will take this over, and I want to talk about the author of this book, Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche. And I think have you all watched Kundam by any chance, the movie Kundam? Scorsese's brilliant film about the Dalai Lama's rebirth. If you have a moment, I think it's, it got a big name, Scorsese, as a director because he got buttonholed by many people in Hollywood to do the Dalai Lama story. So if you haven't seen it, I really strongly advise you to watch it. And another one, if you're Brad Pitt's fan, is the 7 Years in Tibet. Has anybody watched the 7 Years in Tibet, that film? Because I think it's worth having some background about this kind of explosion that happened to spirituality and to the world altogether when Tibetan Buddhism, you could almost say, got unleashed or started to permeate the world. In a short period of time, if I had said the word Dalai Lama 40 years ago, which is probably when I met him, it was almost like, who's that? What are you talking about? And in these short 40 years, I think you can make a case that this man is the spiritual leader of the world. So I think it's really worthwhile for us to go back and watch some of these films and to find out about Trungpa Rinpoche. Trungpa Rinpoche himself was discovered, I think, Janine, you always can correct me, but 3 years old, 4 years old, as a tuku, an 11th reincarnate. A tuku in the Tibetan tradition is someone who makes a vow called the Bodhisattva vow in their life to help other people until all the suffering on the entire planet is eradicated, which is a pretty crazy and vast thing to do. So this Toko tradition is bodhisattvas who have the will and the devotion and the compassion to be reborn again and again. So Trungpa Rinpoche was reborn as a very, very high teacher, Lama. You'd call him something like he came back as the governor of one of the biggest states in Tibet. Like he came back as the governor of California. And he was trained traditionally from the time of 3 to lead both spiritually and temporal this huge expansive land. And then in 1959, he was born in 1940, and when he's 17 years old, he now gets enthroned, and he's has obligations that are hard to imagine. And at that time, the Chinese start making overtures that they're going to invade Tibet. The Dalai Lama goes to meet with Mao Zedong. Mao Zedong says the famous quote, "Religion is poison," and vows to destroy Tibet and vows to take it over, which he does within the next few years. And the Tibetans flee. Some, they say over 1 million were massacred. And others, like Trungpa Rinpoche and the Dalai Lama, escape on foot across the Himalayas. And if you want to read an adventure story that is, it's just so much, it's such a good read. It's called From Lion's Jaw. It's a story of Trungpa Rinpoche's escape when he's 18 years old. And he is so renowned as a teacher that 300 people follow him across the Himalayas. And it's just like an adventure story. You just almost can't believe it happened. He then lands in India, and he's almost immediately put in charge of, by the Dalai Lama, of other young monks. He stays at the house of a very, very famous English woman who is also took Tibetan Buddhist vows. Her name is Bob, I might need help on this. This is Frida Betty. Am I saying it right? Bob? Frida Betty. And she recognizes the brilliance of Trungpa Rinpoche and gets him sent to, who starts to have a command of English, and he is sent to Oxford where he's educated. He is not a normal human being. He is a genius. He's a rascal. He takes off his robes. He marries a very renowned British woman who's 16 years old, scandalizes the British newspapers, and decides that he starts a meditation center in Scotland that's still going, and goes to Canada penniless with his new bride, who's 16 or 17 years old. One story is that one of the things they did was go to a market in, I believe it was Montreal, and they bought a dove with some of their last money. And they did this ritual and released the dove. And they did that with this last money. So this is 1970. He's now a little known because of his work in England, and a group from America create a center for him in Vermont. This is 1970. In 17 years, this man will establish 165 centers worldwide. He will start the first Buddhist university known in the Western world. He will create a newspaper that still goes on as Lion's Roar and is one of the large Buddhist publications in our country. He starts a grade school. He writes over 40 books. He teaches endlessly. And he leaves a legacy that's sometimes enormous and compared to Padmasambhava himself. In 1976, he started training us, and to get on board, I met him in 1974 in Europa, which I have to say felt like it felt like spiritual Woodstock. I don't know if some of you went to Woodstock, but Europa 1974 was like our spiritual Woodstock. You just had this palpable feeling that you were in this wave, this cusp that was kind of where the hippie movement was either going to go or degenerate into something else. But it was based in spirituality. And as you know, Ram Dass was there, or I hope some of you know Ram Dass, and he was there. And Trungpa Rinpoche used to play kind of almost like a tennis game back and forth, like ping pong, because Ram Dass would talk on Tuesday, Thursdays, and Saturday, and Trungpa Rinpoche would come in and talk Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And you just knew it was just tremendously exciting. And there were artists and thinkers and political scientists from all over the world. Allen Ginsberg was there, who I had the pleasure of getting to know. And he starts the School of Disembodied Poetics at Naropa. And it was just a feeling of being around a creative explosion, is the only way I can explain it. But he himself, after hanging with us and really getting to know the language, turns around and starts saying, if you guys don't start sitting, I'm going to quit. I'm not going to teach. Or in essence, he just said, you've got to start sitting. And lo and behold, we became just serious practitioners. Openers in terms of being really close and getting into seminary. This 3-month program was a month-long sit, which in those days was just unheard of. It's still just a marvelous thing to do. I hope you can figure it out in your schedule. 30 days, that's what a daten is, of intense 10 to 12 hours a day of meditation. And that was openers. I got to study with him 13 of his 17 years on the planet. And then we really didn't see it. He has the outrageousness of dying on us at the age of 47 years old. Leaving, and here we are about to take up his pivotal book, he started receiving, after training us as, literally he trained us like Tibetan Buddhist monks. But he liked the moniker of, you guys need to be householder yogis. So we could do, he trained us peerlessly in sitting meditation, the bodhicitta trainings, and then finally the Vajrayana and tantric teachings so well that we could sit next to a Tibetan monk and do the same practices. And the monks would be going, giving us eyes like, how do they know this that well? But he wasn't even close to finished after training us. I think I said the seminary was when it would introduce you to the Vajrayana or tantric teachings. I was privileged to go to 2 of them. And in 1976, he starts getting these downloads, is the only way I can explain it. He's recognized what's known as a terma, somebody who can receive teachings from both the past and present, kind of from, again, celestial realms. And he starts talking about fulfilling a vision that he had as a young man in Tibet, which was that he was to take the Shambhala teachings to the West. Well, we were now all kind of high on our own horse because we had been really trained in this very esoteric practices called the Vajrayana, involved these deity practices. And I think there was a sense of, we felt privileged and maybe a little smug. I think the community itself had smug, and he pulls the plug on the whole thing and starts teaching these utterly simple teachings and makes it clear that from now on, this is what his life is going to be about. And he starts delivering the Shambhala teachings. And he said that all the religions in the world were in danger of being lost if there wasn't a container of civilization, of society that sustained basic goodness, that knew how to hold sacred traditions. He said it was important now that society itself learn how to function around its own goodness, to function. The function of a society is to uplift its citizens to awakening. That was the function of society. And that it would hold, he said, he used the metaphor of Shambhala being this magnificent vase that held all these flowers of the different traditions. But that this is what was needed at the time. I have to say, much to the irritation of many of us and most of us, because the teachings were simplistic and we didn't really understand the power of them, because now he was teaching what was known as the imperial yana, or the yana of perfection, which are utterly simple. So help me out. I've been ranting. I got through it without too much tears, and I'm glad about that. But do you have any questions, or is there anything I can flesh out? Hello? Come back, say something.
Incredibly clear and well organized. So I don't have any questions.
Could you talk a bit more about the simplicity part? What happened when he shifted to simplicity?
Yeah, simplicity is the ultimate insult to obviously complexity, but also ego needs complexity to survive. So all of a sudden you're stuck with this fact that you're perfect by nature, and that you can actually experience that perfection second by second by second. So it undermines methodology in some sense. So that was what he started talking about. He started about talking this silly thing like basic goodness. And once you know basic H, this multi-level thing was popular. And he starts talking about basic goodness and we're all rolling our eyes, like what's going on, And he was just relentless that that we had to take it in this direction, that we had to start thinking a much bigger picture than Buddhism even. We had to start thinking in terms of literally, he said, we had contained the wisdom to save the world. That human wisdom was and compassion. On the one hand, we got ourselves in this pickle, but we contain the wisdom to get ourselves out of this pickle. And so the simplicity is basically almost like that ordinary magic that we started with. It's just.
Oh, when you talked about the history, and it's really good to get that background because I don't know enough about it. I'm not a practitioner of Shambhala, but I am a practitioner of simplicity. And so I was thinking, oh my God, how many different complex practices and terms are required here when I'm thinking everything I need to know I learned in kindergarten, please and thank you and decency. So I'm just thrilled that all of that vast experience that you talk about boiled down to something that's actionable by ordinary people. And that makes me wake up and go, yeah, I know.
Just beautifully spoken, Helen. So that's the invitation, is this utter perfection that exists at any 1 second. And then your job turns out to be to deconstruct the story that keeps you from that and to rest in your basic nature over and over again. And that's what I'll be teaching at the retreat. And that's what I think the sacred wisdom teachings are about. If you ever want to read a beautiful, I don't want to say eulogy, a beautiful piece, a beautiful complimentary piece. This is a book by Jack Kornfield. With him, Joseph Goldstein and Sharon Salzberg probably are the 3 pillars of starting the mindfulness movement, which has somehow taken over our country. And he was there in 1974. I met him and Jack, Joseph in 1974. And Trungpa Rinpoche, Jack and Joseph hadn't taught much. And they met at a cocktail party. And Trungpa Rinpoche in his innumerable style said, come on along, we need you to teach. So he was never intimidated by other traditions. Of course, as I said, Ram Dass was there in high style, displaying the Hindu tradition and the devotional bhakti tradition, and it was marvelous. And if you can get a hold of the book, he says, holding the Dharma banner, holding the banner of the Dharma. He goes into, he outlined his life as the life of a bodhisattva. I think this was interesting. This is from Lama Govinda, is a very renowned Hindu teacher in India. I don't know if many of you have heard of him. His name is Lama Govinda. Very, very. He said, he's saying this, I still have to admit there was no one who walked across the Himalayas and came out of Tibet who had more light than Trungpa Rinpoche. The man literally was like a 1,000-watt light bulb. And he was going in so many directions. Can you imagine in 13 years creating out of pennilessness this empire, you could say, this spiritual empire? So he had this amazing quality of clarity, this amazing brightness. And he was devoted. This is just a beautiful article about his openness, how he worked with. According to Trungpa Rinpoche, taught the Dharma, the way of practice, this is to you, Helen, wasn't the things that make up our personality our problem, but rather to see that they're part of the fabric and pattern of being, and they become workable and in fact usable as we become wiser. So it's just a beautiful, again, piece dedicated to Trungpa Rinpoche and how much Joseph was inspired and benefited from relationship with Trungpa Rinpoche. So Rick Fields, I don't know if you know that name. He wrote How the Swans. It's about how Buddhism came to America. He's a very brilliant man. He went on to found the Yoga Journal. A very, very bright man, wonderful man. Rick Fields, Dharma student and poet, wrote, "This man caused more trouble and did more good than anyone I've ever met." So that's if you have a moment, and if you don't mind, if we're okay, I mean, again, I've been speaking a long time. I'm open to interruptions, but I thought I'd tell you a story or two, because in all the time I've taught, now I've taught for a long time, I very rarely talk about stories about Trungpa Rinpoche, because there's some, if you're lucky enough to get a spiritual teacher, well, everybody thinks theirs is the best, and that's the way it should be. And so you don't want to appear like you're bragging about your own spiritual teacher. And so a lot of times you don't tell the stories until you're kind of in a more intimate group that has some lubrication and etc. But I thought I'd tell you a couple of stories about Trungpa Rinpoche, if that's okay, Jimmy. You need to unmute. Everybody unmute. I don't want to be here alone anymore. Everybody unmute. So I asked for your permission to tell a couple of stories about Trungpa Rinpoche. Nobody said anything, so I'm going to go ahead.
Great, great,
Sounds good, Dean.
great.
Go for it. Yeah.
Great.
A little confirmation from the void, please.
Yeah, yeah.
All ears.
So there was this guy, Joshua Zinn, and he took over from Rick Fields, and he was the editor of what was known as the Vajradhatu Sun, which then became the Shambhala Sun, which then became the Lion's Roar. So do any of you get the Lion's Roar? Beautiful magazine. I strongly suggest it. And so Joshua was, who I knew pretty well. He was at what's called Lama Foundation. Have any of you heard of Lama Foundation? It's outside of Santa Fe, down in New Mexico. It was one of our real first spiritual centers, eclectic and beautifully put together and thought out. It was kind of, again, the vestige of the hippies that went in deeply into spiritual practice. So Joshua is going to get enlightened for sure. He's a really bright guy from Harvard. And he's going to get enlightened for sure. And he decides the way to do that, because he's heard about it, is that he's going to stay in silence for a year. And he's going to stay in retreat. And so he has his little retreat cabin. He would walk around when he's in public with a blackboard. And he writes what he wants to know, or whether he wants food and such, on his blackboard. So, it's still a small community, or, I mean, the word got out that there was this wild, crazy, and marvelous Tibetan teacher named Trungpa Rinpoche, and that he was just hanging out in the kitchen. So Joshua decides that he's going to go down and either teach him or learn something from Trungpa Rinpoche. And he goes down with his blackboard and starts communicating with Trungpa Rinpoche. And at that point, Trungpa Rinpoche was really not an ordinary guy. He was dressed in aviator sunglasses, a cowboy hat, cowboy jeans, and cowboy boots. And of course, he was a small Tibetan man, about 5'6". He had the ability to look like he was a giant, but he was small. So he's got these reflector glasses on, his cowboy boots. And John Kabat-Zinn comes up and says, "Who are you?" Da, 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 and kind of wants to get to know Trungpa Rinpoche. So Trungpa Rinpoche does this famous thing that he did with his glasses. He puts his glasses down, looks out over at John Kabat-Zinn, and goes, "There's a war on. Do you want to join me?" And it infuriated John Kabat-Zinn. It just, he said he actually got nauseous. It was like something in that moment made a mockery of everything that he had done in this year of retreat. And he went back to his cabin and he fumed, and he got obsessed. And he said he literally talked himself into killing Trungpa Rinpoche. he said, he thought the only way out, or he said he went crazy. So he got an axe, he brought down this axe, and he found out where Trungpa Rinpoche was staying, and he starts storming up to Trungpa Rinpoche, who's sitting on the porch of his thing with his cowboy boots and his hat and aviator glasses. And Joshua says, I looked at Trungpa Rinpoche, and I looked at the axe, and I looked at Trungpa Rinpoche, and I looked at the axe, and I did that several times, and I realized I needed a bigger axe. And he instantly became one of his most devoted students. Okay, that one didn't play that well.
That was good. That's good.
That was awesome.
Okay, so there's this other story. So Trungpa Rinpoche is now in Colorado, and he's dressed as I just said. He literally took on costumes throughout his life. Once he gave up his robes, which is its own story. I don't know if you knew this about him. When he was in a debate and about 22 years old, he felt like he actually said he thought he was an animal in the zoo, the way people gawked at him in his robes, and they projected so much on him that he felt that he was going to die if he couldn't transmit the Dharma, that the robes were in the way. People's conception of his, so he took off his robes, which is a huge deal for a tukul to do. Anyway, I don't know if you knew this, but Rinpoche drove a Jaguar into a joke shop and was crippled for his whole life. And that's why he spoke in this very high tone of voice. And we all almost became more endeared to him because he walked with a limp, and we had to help him for the rest of his life. He was partly, he was a paraplegic, one hand and one leg didn't work so well. So when you met him, he talked in this high voice, and he had this limp, and but he's in this cowboy bar down in Colorado, and they're playing pool, and a bunch of cowboys are sitting around lined up to play pool in this cowboy bar, and the guy's lined up to take his shot, like you do with a pool stick, and Trungpa Rinpoche goes over to him. Just as he's going to shoot, he taps the end of the cue stick. Completely ruins the shot, right? I mean, he totally intentionally hit the guy's cue stick, so he blew the shot. So the cowboy looks at him like, what? And here's this small Asian man with cowboy hat and aviator glasses, and the Trungpa Rinpoche goes, whoops. So the cowboy lets it slide, And actually, this story I got firsthand from the guy who was there, who was supposed to be protecting him. And so a little later on, they're kind of milling around. Trungpa Rinpoche is having a beer and watching it. And the same guy is going to go up and take a shot with a pool stick, right? So sure enough, he lines this thing up. They're all serious. They're playing for beers or something. Sure enough, he takes a shot. Trungpa Rinpoche hits it in the cue stick, and the ball just completely goes out. Well, there was going to be death. The cowboy turns around and says, I'm going to take your ass apart. We're going to go out in the parking lot, and you are going to be hurt, man. And Trungpa Rinpoche goes like this. He goes, and dissipated the whole anger, and everybody started laughing, and the whole place transformed into just a party, I guess. He just goes like that to the cowboy. So he had this, yeah. Okay, this one's real personal. I was up all one night with Trungpa Rinpoche. I had the privilege of being his personal attendant. It was called being a kusa, where you were up with him and you cared for his physical body, and you literally fed him. You clothed him, you helped him on with his clothes. So it was a very, 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 very privileged and intimate relationship. And I was on one night, and in all honesty, looking back, Trungpa Rinpoche was dying. And we didn't know that. I mean, we weren't ready to accept that, so we didn't see it. But I was on all night, and Trungpa Rinpoche started throwing up about midnight. And I actually set my clock by, he started throwing up every 22 minutes. And my job was on the first heave. The first time I heard the rustling was to go in there and have a stainless steel bowl and to help him vomit, to help him be a little more comfortable while he threw up, while he was sick. And I had a box of tissues next to me. And I would take these tissues while he was throwing up, and I would wipe his face and then throw them in the bowl. And then I would take the bowl and throw it down the bathroom and have the bowl next to me so I could do it 20 minutes later. So I've done this about 10 times. And he's throwing up, and I'm wiping his mouth and throwing the tissues in the bowl. And at one point he grabs my hand and he goes and he takes the tissue out of the box and he goes like this with the tissue. And he wipes his mouth like he's making love with himself and puts the Kleenex in the bowl. It completely changed how I approach meditation practice. I was approaching this like a job, or like, I'm going to be efficient on wiping his mouth with this Kleenex. And at that moment, he gave me a transmission, was like, never let your mind go into aggression. Whatever you're doing, whether it's wiping your bottom or whatever you're doing, it matters whether you're present for it and loving with it. And it was like a transmission for me that utterly, well, I'm too stubborn to say it utterly changed me. I just was trying to convey, in the midst of his sickness, he was still teaching me how to be present and kind and compassionate, even to a piece of toilet paper or Kleenex. So if a bunch of old students get along, these stories are endless. So I don't want to, I just wanted to give you a slight flavor of this thing. I feel like I've taken up enough time. I do have, we could go into meditation, but I don't know. I'd like to do that. I guess I want to turn this over at this point. I want to say this. Shambhala as an organization has lost its way, a couple, even 3 times, where the organization wasn't in line with the kindness and compassion. The bureaucracy itself and the hierarchy got too stifling. It was one thing when Trungpa Rinpoche was alive, because he could carry off virtually any, he could carry off anybody around him and hold the energy. And the reason I'm saying this is that I'm stunned. I'm sitting here talking in a positive and upbeat voice and encouraging everybody to know the Shambhala teachings. If you told me a year ago I'd be doing this, I would have said no. I didn't. The Shambhala organization has blown up in some sense, and I couldn't be more excited. I actually joined a committee to try to, in a naive way, put the pieces back together. But it's almost like the scattering, if you know the story of His Holiness Karmapa's mala, the teachings, nobody owns the Shambhala teachings. You own the Shambhala teachings. And what we're doing in Hawaii with Jimmy's meek and yet vast vision, I think has a better chance of manifesting Shambhala than anybody else I know that's doing anything. We have a chance at this. And I think somewhat it's because of the fact that we live in a place that has aloha as a prime directive of how to live your life. I actually went to Mipam Rinpoche before this blew up and said Hawaii was the logical place for Shambhala to reside. So rather than discouraged, I couldn't be more encouraged by the beauty of Trungpa Rinpoche's vision, which even he was just a spokesman for it. I had a teacher who said, you know, the Shambhala vision is what is why we know about equality. It's why we know about justice. It's why we know about upliftedness. Those teachings, these concepts are what has surfaced because of this culture that went before us. He said that the Shambhala teachings and the Shambhala culture actually was on the planet 22,000 to 25,000 years ago. And that the people, it became unnecessary for them to need the lessons of the earthbound existence. But that's the vastness of the kind of thing we're talking about. And I guess what I'm trying to do, go back to the beginning about the word tendril, about the word auspicious coincidence, about the fact that you've now heard these words, you've now been invited or that taken on you've already raised your hand, that you've taken on the vision of wanting to help the globe and wanting to be kinder and benefit yourself. And again, from some basic point of view, that is the Shambhala teachings coming through, the wisdom of the human compassion and wisdom coming through. So I leave that note that these, in this disbursement, in this blowing up of our community, many senior students, myself included, were dreadfully scared that Trungpa Rinpoche's teachings would get lost. And one outreach that happened of this from Trungpa Rinpoche's widow, his first wife, the 16-year-old that I referred to earlier. She actually owns the copyright on Shambhala teachings and the writings of Trungpa Rinpoche. And she said, nobody owns this, everybody owns this. So it's like the mala has broken. It's in our hands in some sense. It doesn't really matter. You can't like sign a document and say, I'm now a Shambhalian. It isn't quite like that. You can sign a document saying, I'm a human being with wisdom and compassion who wants to benefit the planet and have a good life. But that's where I guess I want to leave this, is to really, there's nobody out there to say, you have to go to your own heart, your own experience now. There's no bureaucracy that says we're doing the right thing or the wrong thing with this. And I'm looking forward to what my friends, most in the Seat of Wisdom teachings, what they're going to say and how they're going to propagate the teachings. But I'm going to keep reminding us that it comes from our experience and comes from the love of one another. And that we have a leg up because of this extraordinary place we live and because of the word aloha. So I want to leave it with that. And if you have any questions, of course, I'd love a couple of questions if you'd like.
If I can, I'm kind of new in this group, Dean, but I wanted to appreciate your taking us on a time travel and a heart travel journey of your experience and this experience of an incredible and controversial teacher. I did actually do the Wisdom Seat training with the Wisdom Seat teachers over the winter, and so I can vouch for how good the course is. This idea that, you know, basic goodness is something that's inherent in every human being, and finding out what is the obstacle that prevents us from seeing that in ourselves and others is this process of, I think you said deconstructing or conditioning or something like that. But I definitely wanted to take a moment to appreciate you sharing your journey and your experience and encouraging us in this time of real turmoil that, you know, stand up and stand for what's true and meaningful and noble in human nature. So thank you very much.
Nicely spoken, thank you.
Dean,
Yes, Richard.
Yeah, I want to second what Ginny said, Jenny, and thank you for, your heartfelt talk today, and sharing your wisdom. And I have a question about Trungpa Rinpoche's teachings. There's a wonderful quote, at least I find it wonderful, from Thomas Keating, who was the father of centering prayer, which is the Christian version of mindfulness. And he started it back in the 70s when he saw all these people going to Insight Meditation Society in Barre, Massachusetts, which is Buddhist studies there. And they found out that the Buddhists were doing exactly what the monks were doing at this Trappist monastery. And when Thomas Keating died, they put together a movie celebrating his life, which is entitled Thomas Keating, A Life Surrendered to Love. It's an 18-minute video. It's wonderful. But in that, he has this quote: "The spiritual life is all about doing what we all have to do anyway, is death, but doing it sooner because it'll enable our actions to be much more effective." Now, I bring that into Trungpa Rinpoche's teachings. Clearly, Thomas Keating is not talking about the physical death, but he's talking about the death of the self, or in Buddhism, not self. And I wondered if Trungpa Rinpoche talked about that. And I just, a little note there, it's Thomas Keating, A Life Surrendered to Love. And in the awareness of not self is love, which you're going back to Helen's point about simplicity. It seems very simple. And one other little note, just as you picked up the book with Jack Kornfield as one of the authors, I was thinking of Jack Kornfield because of, I heard him once say that the Buddha said, "There's only one question we're asked when we die, is how well do we love?" And it can't get any simpler than that. So anyway, my question has to do, I guess it's kind of a combination question about not self and love and Trungpa's teachings.
Well, I'm not, at the end of every out-breath is a death. And what keeps us from love is a sense of self-cherishing and self-absorption. Love is our inherent nature. That's what you could call it, basic goodness, or you could call it presence, or you could call it wisdom and compassion. But the complexities of self-projection is what keeps you from love. So it couldn't be more in line, Richard. And
Yeah.
an aside there, that I hope is fun. When Trungpa Rinpoche started in '74 in Europa, he very quickly started an equanimical, I can't remember, Jay, do you remember the group? The Father Keating was there. Aiken Roshi was there. Hindus. He started bringing all the religions together instantly. Many great teachers, and that went on for many, many, many years in combination with Naropa, including, as I said, Father Keating. And Trungpa Rinpoche also had a chance meeting with, more than a chance meeting, he exchanged letters with Thomas Merton. I don't know if any of you know his teachings, they're a very renowned Catholic teacher. They were also admirers of one another. So Trungpa Rinpoche, he himself didn't see any conflict with any religion.
Thank you, Dean.
Jay?
Thank you.
There's a component that it's interesting that Trungpa Rinpoche, I think he came, I guess you have to know what the life in like it is like in Tibet for the monks. I mean, they're in dark monasteries. It's a male monastic practice 24/7 every day of the year. And then for someone like that, like Trungpa and other monks too, to come to America because of the invasion from the Chinese and to enter the West where what we're dealing with is raising children and having spouses and having a house and going to work in modern speed and modern culture. So he comes here and he's really, his vision is to plant the Buddha Dharma in the West. It was a real, I don't even know if he knew what he was up against, but it was a real hefty vision. And he drew on things, on other contemplative arts that I think is an important point here, particularly as Jimmy wants this to happen in Hawaii, because Hawaii is made up of a lot of Japanese people. And first of all, when he went to England, he picked up Ikebana, Japanese flower arranging from Stella Ko. And so he got really immersed in the Japanese culture. I think that was his first introduction. And Japanese Ikebana does join heaven and earth, and it works with a lot of space. And then he also had us having elocution lessons, how to speak properly, because we're so speedy in our speech, and how to use space in our speech, et cetera, and dressage. So he drew from the English, but more importantly, he drew from the Japanese. And a lot of that had to do with Suzuki Roshi's relationship with him. I think that's where it started. So he had us, Dean? Sorry.
Oh, I was going to point out that he stole from many, many cultures. Whenever he saw something that uplifted people,
Yeah.
he was a tremendous lover of the arts.
Yeah.
Arts and education are to him almost synonymous.
He used a lot of different things to help wake us up from our stupor, our ignorance, our fog, that we're in. And so he used tea ceremony, which has a lot of space and elegance, upliftedness. He used calligraphy. We had to do these things. Like at seminary, we had to do all these things. And he used kyudo, which is archery. So whenever you take a program, you have to do one of these things as part of your daily practice. And so, and it's interesting that, Jimmy has chosen this book because we do have these cultures already here. I think that's just a point to point out. But it was interesting too that he did say before he died, I'm sure he knew he was going to die long before we did. He said, "Now I've given you everything. Now it's up to you." And so he kind of turned it over to his Western students, so to be interpreted into Western culture. So, and I think that's what Dean has done in his new book. He has taken all his training, interpreted into his new book on happiness teachings, and all his Western students are doing that. They're interpreted into the West, which it can't. At some point, maybe it doesn't look like it's Tibetan Buddhism, but it is. I mean, that's the roots of it. That's all I wanted to say is that.
Yeah, I don't think I've had an original thought since I've met the guy. I just feel like the one thing I took away from Trungpa Rinpoche, everybody took something different, but it was liberating for me, is that we were thoroughly trained. I'm not saying we were good students, but we were thoroughly trained. But he told us that it really was up to us to figure out how to do this in our culture. Mm-hmm. That just was a place that I think it was probably part of the reason he checked out young, is that he truly felt he had planted the seed thoroughly and well, but he couldn't make that transition of how this was going to land. And here we are in this crazy time. I mean, it's stunning to read Trungpa Rinpoche. Now he's talking about the current state of the world affairs is a source of concern to all of us. Threat of nuclear war, widespread poverty, economic instability, social and political chaos, and psychological upheavals of many kinds. The world is in absolute turmoil. The Shambhala teachings are founded on the premise that there is a basic human wisdom that can help to solve the world's problems. This was written 41 years ago. So it's just a word of encouragement and not just encouragement, auspicious coincidence, tendril about being with everyone, about sharing this with you, and about, I don't know, just being with folks who you know, have some hope and vision that we can turn this thing around, I guess you could say. So thank you for your adding. Go ahead. There's so much I want to hear from you. Liz has so much to add. She's about to become a meditation instructor in the ecological program of Europa. I'd love if you would check in for a second.
Oh, thank you so much, Dean. This is really, I feel like it is kind of auspicious for me because I'm going to be taking a meditation instructor training at Naropa, and then concurrently, hopefully, the plan is to be guiding eco-psychology students in their meditation practice. And it feels very auspicious. So even though I'm going to miss the first September 11th meeting because of that, but I just feel really grateful for everything that you've shared today. And it's just, this is it. We're here and it's time. And I'm actually really inspired, I guess, seeing everybody here on this call. And I know there's probably some people who are planning to join that aren't even here. And it's just, to me, I think that community coming together, that we all share this common vision, and Jimmy's, the driving force of that. It's very heartening when it's such a challenging times that this is, I guess this is where the warriorship comes. We come together and we build strength in that way by being together.
Thank you. I am going to miss you, Liz, at that first retreat. I have to tell you the truth. I'm tired. I have a little temper tantrum going on about Zoom right now. I'd really like to be belly to belly with all of you. I feel I speak better when I can feel you, and I teach better when I'm with you. That's just what I wish for, and I hope we can pull this off, because I very, very much want to feel you, and I want to feel sacredness with you, and I think we can do that at this mini retreat, and that's the goal. So with that said, I thank you. I'm going to pass it over to either Jerome or Arlene or Jimmy, or I think that's who's next in line, right? Correct?
And Jerome, are you ready to take up the mic?
Go ahead, Ali.
Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and make you a co-host. My Zoom this time is letting me make you co-host, so there you go. You're now in charge. So you can go ahead and share your presentation.
Right. Thank you, everybody. Welcome, Mindful Hawaii Ohana. How do I follow Dean? You shared such excellent stories, and you talked about carrying out Trungpa Rinpoche's teachings. Janine also talked about giving your everything, or giving everything, so that now it's up to us to spread how we can spread mindfulness to the rest of the community. And it kind of ties into what I'm going to be talking about today, the Mindful Warrior Project, specifically the stewardship group, and then Inside Timer as well. I wanted to start this presentation with a quote by Trungpa Rinpoche, but Dean had plenty of them. So, but we cannot change the way the world is, but by opening ourselves to the world as it is. You may find that gentleness, decency, and bravery are available, not only to us, but to all human beings. And when we think about what's ahead of us and what Dean was talking about in terms of carrying out Trungpa Rinpoche's vision and teachings, this is kind of what's in front of us for those of us who might want to participate in this stewardship group. We've talked about the stewardship group in quite a few different Mindful Hawaii meetings, just to give us, some of those who might be new to this, a little bit of a backdrop on this. We're going to start with, what does actually stewardship talk about? And this is a definition. Stewardship is the conducting, supervising, or managing of something, especially the careful and responsible management of something trusted to one's care. And when we talk about that something that we are entrusted with, it is those teachings that we are going to be learning through the classes. And then once we continue to build our own warriorship, how are we going to share that with the rest of the community? So, which brings us to this Mindful Warrior Project Stewardship Group. Who are they? We like to term this as a volunteer corps that will turn the Mindful Warrior Project from an idea to an action. The teachings that Dean is going to be graciously offering us and facilitating is one aspect of this, the stewardship group. And then other platforms are going to help us to spread the word. So, okay, it all sounds nice and flowery, but what are we actually going to do in the stewardship group? We're looking to recruit other warriors. So Dean, in the beginning, he was talking about different people just within this Zoom meeting about their warriorship. There are other warriors out there. Where are they? And can we bring them in so that we can strengthen our own community, so that we can bring that word out? So that's one of the things that we're going to do. We're also going to train and strengthen our own practices. So through attending what Dean is doing and through our own discipline and practice, we can strengthen our own ability to feel confident in spreading what we're going to learn. And then when we have that confidence, we can start to form islands. When they talk about islands, these islands of sanity, different special interest groups that we can potentially connect with. For instance, maybe the business community, maybe education, and so forth. But can we go into these communities and see how mindfulness can help in terms of them being more effective, or finding their own, I'm getting at a loss of words, but just want to make sure that when we go out into the community and form these islands, that they feel good that what we are teaching them is going to help them be better professionals or better people. And let me use that word, better spiritual warriors. What else we'll be doing is also celebrating and elevating. So, this is just the beginning, but as we continue to grow within the community, we hope to celebrate the successes that we do have as the stewardship group, and also to elevate the collective mindset of our community. Dean was talking about Hawaii being a special place because of aloha, and this could be the seat of where these teachings could continue to flourish. Certainly we can help to elevate that as this stewardship group. So who are we looking for? What kind of individuals would we like to see? People with a passion for mindfulness, people with a passion for change, and people for a passion for community. These are all things that we're going to need in order to spread these teachings. Dean had started this meeting talking about what are those skill sets or individual talents that are going to be needed in order to do this. And for here, this passion for mindfulness, change, for community, it's going to take some special people to do that. We're going to be looking for collaborators because we're going to be reaching out into the community. We need folks that are willing to do that, to take that initiative to reach out. So this entails work. It's going to take work to infiltrate these communities and to collaborate and connect with them so that they understand that what we are doing is something that's good for the collective whole. Okay, I'm going backwards. Oh no. Here we are. All right, so in terms of the stewardship group, what can we look out for? Who are we looking for? I just went over that, but anybody who's interested in spreading mindfulness into the community. And when are we going to start meeting? We're going to start meeting monthly starting next month, 3 to 4 p.m. after the Hawaii community meetings. Where? It's going to be virtual at first via Zoom. And hopefully if things start to calm down with this pandemic, we could support meeting in person, but for now, to keep everybody safe, we would like to meet virtually. So today's call to action, at least for the stewardship group, is if anything that Dean was saying or I was saying connected with you, join us, because we need everybody that we can in order to spread the word on what we are learning. So I'm going to stop here first and ask, what questions do you have about the Mindful Warrior Project Stewardship Group? All right, as a facilitator, I usually take 5 seconds of silence before I know to move on. All right, so.
I have one question.
Okay, Helen.
And that has to do with the requirement for a specific practice. I am already, I guess, I guess I consider myself a minister without walls as part of a community that I belong to. So I'm not much for organized expressions of that mindfulness. And I just wanted to make sure that that's okay, that it isn't a text or a particular practice that I have to commit to apart from being in the world.
No, it's just people who feel like when we talk about mindfulness and being in the present moment, if that's something that you feel can help benefit others, then you're more than welcome to join us. It's non-secular. Great question.
Jerome, if I could chime in just for a quick minute. It could also be something as simple as seeing, an opportunity to share mindfulness in your communities, like wherever it is, at work, in social settings, even just day-to-day interaction with like the lady at the supermarket that checks you out or something, just finding those moments, those spaces where you can connect with someone and be that warm, open-hearted, gentle, caring person that you can have that connection with someone, that open-heartedness, and just taking that into day-to-day life.
Okay. I can go
Hopefully
with that.
the things that we'll be covering as part of the stewardship group will hopefully help empower you and give you confidence to go forth, when you feel, the time is right for you, essentially, to take that up.
Oh, put, Arlene. Thank you. Other questions or comments? All right, I'm gonna go with that 5 seconds of silence again.
Yeah, I have a question.
Okay.
I mean, I've had the same question, Helen, in that when you talk about going out into businesses and education, it's just like, unless you're a meditation instructor, what are you going out with? I mean, I have a real question about that. You know, I mean, there's a few of us that are meditation instructors, but you know, what are you offering? I mean, I know you're offering your kindness and your compassion, but I mean, what there has to be some. I'm just asking, what are you offering? You know.
I think that's up to the stewardship group to decide.
Okay.
Yeah. You know, I was thinking about that this morning. There's probably going to have to be some kind of program that we're going to come up with. And that's good that there are already some mindfulness practitioners and people that teach already. But when we think about these communities that we want to go into, we're going to have to think about what's there with them. You know, why would we want to do this? And how do we have some kind of content or deliverable or something that's going to appease them to say, yeah, this is something that makes sense for us, that's going to help us with our objectives and being successful, or whatever it is, being our best teachers, being our best community leaders, and so forth. What that looks like, I think it is up to discussion between the group.
Thank you.
I'd like to add one little thing to that too. It's not also what we're going into with our ideas and everything, but the communities that we're going into, I'm assuming, are going to be very different. For instance, I live in Kahaluu, and one of the communities that I've worked with are the youth in Kahaluu, which have, you know, are very local, very Hawaiian identity oriented, and they lost one of their great mentors and supporters a couple of years ago who passed away. And any transition into what we can offer as far as mindfulness go has to come through that filter of Hawaii identity and the particular problems that they face. So it's definitely, it can't be a one size fits all. Wherever community we go into, we have to listen very closely to their needs and all of that. So it will be, and then I'm assuming that as the collaboration involves is just coming, well, you know, what might we, you know, here's an idea, here's an idea, here's an idea. And then we come up with something unique for each situation.
Thanks for saying that, Melanie, and I agree wholeheartedly. It's not like you're going to offer something that's turnkey for these communities. It will take listening and understanding what are those unique things that they face and putting together something for them that's going to work.
Also, just to get to both of your comments, basically the series of programs that we're going to start up, starting with the retreat in September and then the wisdom seek classes. Those offerings will hopefully kind of help set the view of the stewardship group and this particular project. You know, as Dean was talking about a basic goodness, and we'll take that all apart and dive into the teachings of Chogyam Trungpa in more detail, just to set a baseline for everyone. And then the stewardship group can maybe self-identify within the group, you know, what interests its members might have in terms of taking mindfulness into their own communities. And we can all brainstorm how best to tailor that mindfulness approach to the particular community that individual or group of folks, you know, may want to work with. So it's basically first providing tool set for everyone that is interested in having more exertion, more initiative, and then support of those folks as they go out into their communities.
Thank you again, Arlene, for sharing that. Other thoughts before we move on?
That the Dalai Lama, when he was here last, I think for the last 2 times he's been here, he did start, I'm sure some of you know what he did, but he started in a few schools, select schools, about teaching mindfulness. It's just a thought of exploring how he is doing this. Maybe there's some piggybacking going on, continuing what he's doing, getting involved. I don't know, it's just an idea, you know. What he did is quite profound, and he had children meditating in the classrooms. And does anybody know about this program?
Not specifically, but I recently, it's something I'm going to look into.
Yeah.
But I recently became aware that at my daughter's school in Nolani, they have this program called Social Emotional Learning, and they're bringing some organization in that teaches the kids about mindfulness and compassion, and you know, giving them a different skill set for how to deal with problems. So for example, Ariel was called a effing bee by somebody in aftercare the other day, a little boy who immediately regretted that decision and tried to recant it, but it was too late. And interestingly, the next day, one of her friends said, you know, it would be great, you know, I understand you're upset that this kid said that to you, but it'd be great if you not continue to be upset with him or pick on him or anything, because he has some sort of disability or something, and he can't, you know, help himself. And basically giving her, you know, compassion 101, you know, in 5th grade, which to me was like mind blown, you know. I can't, so, you know, whatever they're doing in that program, it's taking good effect, you know, in that little school community.
Wonderful.
So, yeah, so I'm gonna try and connect up with whoever's doing that program to see if we can't get them to speak at one of our Mindful Hawaii meetings, since we have so many educators, you know, that are part of the group.
Yeah,
would benefit from having that exposure.
and and if the Dalai Lama's group is still working with the schools to see how it's worked for them, and some tools or some tips or some curriculum. You know, they have a pretty set curriculum. If we could use that, or etc.
Yeah, have them come and speak as well. Just give folks in Mindful Hawaii, you know, as many different tools in their toolkit that they can draw on.
When we could go in, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jerome?
Yes.
You know, I just wrote some stuff down just because I've been musing. It's actually said that John Kabat-Zinn and Goldman and Goldstein and Cornfield sat down and somewhat divided up the world in terms of who was going to take what with mindfulness. Like Goldman took psychology and Kabat-Zinn took medical, and I mean, they literally like knew that they were on a campaign to take the joint over. It's kind of fun to think about that we're having that same discussion, you know. As I write this down, I realize we've made inroads. Richard and myself have both talked to the military already. Richard, are you still with us? Maybe he's gone, but there's the military, which we have in Zan, and there's the medical healthcare. I've taught at doctors, I've taught at Castle, there's schools, and then I think the one that's really, really kind of wide open and really exciting is churches, you know, to expand to the whole thing with Father Keating, non-economical approach that mindfulness allows, that Buddhism in some ways allows, as Shambhala or altogether. And also, I just put this down, we are in the prisons. We have been for almost 2 decades. So there's a sense that we have a nexus in front of us. We have some ways that we could play. Some of it's just my thought, these little scribbles I'm doing. The thing with the military is that every once in a while you get a guy who's, oh, you know, I forgot to mention Pema. I mean, I don't know why, I just need to mention Pema. I mean, talk about somebody who's hit it out of the park, or the student of Trungpa Rinpoche. Hasn't she done good by all of us? I don't know why my mind flew there, but I just felt I needed to mention her name about students that have come out of Trungpa Rinpoche. Oh, I know, the non-academical. So we have some inroads on these places that are real now already, right? And then this wild guy Jimmy, he's trying to put in chips and microphones and videos in on the legislatures now, you know. So we've got inroads in the politics, right? I mean, there's guys like Josh Green that are really sympathetic to mindfulness. It's just interesting. It isn't so far-fetched, right?
And I think it may be approached. It's possible that these things are already happening under different names and guises. There's an informal group that has been concerned about emerging right-wing thinking in not only schools, but local politics and communities. And so through media presence here. And so this group doesn't have a name, but it's led by somebody who is involved in an interfaith community on Maui. And they have, you know, probably 50 people are part of that group who are mindful in their every word. Some of them do mindfulness specifically, and then others are involved in a whole variety of specific religious practices, spiritual practices, secular practices. You know, these things. I'm sitting on the committee for the status of women, and so I know that there is a way to bring this into that setting in some way, or my work with universities. So that was my question. It looks as if some of this is already there. There are people using these terms and acting mindfully in Hawaii in ways that just make my heart shimmer. So I don't know if it's a question of taking over the joint. I think the joint is already hopping.
Thank you. This is a wonderful discussion. A lot of ideas and possible connections are already percolating. With only 5 minutes, I don't want to take any more time. I know I had to talk about Insight Timer. I'll just say that Insight Timer is an app that you can use to strengthen your own meditation practice. In terms of Mindful Hawaii, I started a group in Insight Timer for that, just to bring awareness that Mindful Hawaii actually exists. And I think there's like over 50 people that have joined the app group. And I've been posting every now and then our events and things of that nature, especially this Mindful Warrior project. Hopefully we can get some of those people on board as well, again, because we were trying to recruit warriors. I'm going to turn this over now to Arlene with the remainder of time left. I'm sorry, but thank you all for your time.
Jerome. So basically just in our last few minutes here, I wanted to briefly touch on, you know, what I was mentioning earlier in answering Janine's and Melanie's question about, you know, what we're going to start off offering. And as I mentioned, on September 11th, very auspicious date, right? We're going to lay the seeds, you know, to break break down, as we say, the infrastructure that we've been holding up in this society and start fresh with something different, which is Chogyam Trungpa Teachings. Shambhala book is going to be what we'll be getting an introduction to and his sort of seminal teachings. And then after that, we're going to start holding regular study group meetings, essentially. I don't know if you, Jay, or Dean remember what the regularity, like the frequency of the study groups were going to be. I don't remember that one detail. Maybe you know, Jerome.
TBC.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we'll figure that out. But basically, on some regular pattern, we're going to be offering the study group and basically covering kind of a few different chapters out of that book at a time, and discussing several of the basic concepts that the book addresses. And so we're going to look at the overall vision of Shambhala in the first session, and then topics such as fear and fearlessness in the second session, the dawn of the great eastern sun, right, in the third session, celebrating the journey in the fourth session. We'll have maybe we'll incorporate the same intermission of the study groups that they did in the Wisdom Seed program, but we'll see. Lesson 5 is going to be on nowness. Lesson 6 on discovering magic. Lesson 7 on sacred world. Lesson 8 on natural hierarchy. Lesson 9 on authentic presence. And that will round out the offerings. And generally how they're going to be organized is we'll all kind of sign into Zoom, and we'll have a kind of a brief orientation. And then we'll just start out with sitting meditation practice for a piece of time. And then we'll have a reading from the text that we'll be contemplating a little bit. We'll listen to, or watch rather, the video that was part of the original offering by the Wisdom Seat in Philadelphia, where they had a lot of Chogyam Trungpa's students. It was kind of a who's who of Chogyam Trungpa students, very interestingly. We'll watch their video kind of presenting whatever that specific topic is of that day. And then we'll have some discussions amongst ourselves, which Dean will lead, and the rest of us Mindful Warrior Project stewards will help facilitate as well. We might have breakout discussions too. We'll see. Marina likes breakout discussions. That's not my preferred thing, but we might do that. Who knows? Keep it, edgy. And then we'll have, some more discussion and close out. So hopefully that sounds appealing to you, as well as the meditation retreat, and you'll join us starting off in September. And I throw it back over to Jimmy for closing comments.
Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Dean and Jerome, for the presentation. And I thought the questions and comments that came through was very interesting, I thought. But it also suggests to me that we need to devote our community meeting to having lengthy conversations about people's perspectives about where Mindful Hawaii is and will be going, and how does people get involved, and does it involve abandoning your basic spiritual practice, if you will, if you're coming from one. I think basically what needs to be said here is that Mindful Hawaii is open to all practices, because fundamentally there is a belief that they're all the same fundamentally. And I think we need to find a way to have a conversation about discovering what's fundamental and where we are all connected. And I'm sure that we can do that. And in that process, we will all become very much aware as to the commonalities of being human. And then we have different manifestations, obviously. But the idea is that we need to have a society that allows people to be heartful. You know, like the Dalai Lama says, without educating our hearts, we will not be able to save this world. And so we must be very concerned about how we proceed in the future. And obviously, if you look back at the last 100, 200 years of American history, or even the history of the world, I don't think much has been sinking in. And I think it's time for us to really look at bringing everybody together under a roof, spiritual roof, if you will. And I don't know what the exact description of it will be, but I think it will evolve from our talking to each other over a period of time. And I'm committed to opening up a process for that conversation to take place. I think today when Dean talked about basic goodness, everybody has that basic goodness. And then from that goodness, a lot of things are manifested, like love, aloha, but it's a manifestation of who we are fundamentally as a human being. And we need to encourage people to get in touch with that more. And I'm hoping that the training that we go through together will help us to get in touch with that and begin to express ourselves from that sense of goodness that we can discover about ourselves. It's not an action, but it's something that's there that we need to touch. And I'm hoping that we can do that. I'm hoping I'm making sense to some people or everybody, but as we continue to talk story with one another, it will certainly get clarified, clear on all those points. Anybody got any questions for me? I don't know, sounds like Dean was going to pop a question there.
You have to
You're
unmute.
muted.
Dean,
What?
you have to unmute.
Oh, I was gonna play with Jimmy and say, when do we get paid?
No, you get paid by the love that people will show you. How's that?
I knew you'd come up with it. I set you up, Jimmy. I teed you up.
Jerome, any last final words?
I have a piece of business is that Jerome, I think you still need a ride to the September 11th retreat. If anybody's coming over from Townside to Kailua to help Jerome out.
I'll
Anybody?
be coming over.
Thanks for saying that, Jay.
Yeah. You'll be coming over?
Eileen lives in Manoa, right?
Yeah, you could
And
tell
Jerome,
by
you
my
live in-
background.
I am fully vaccinated.
You
Me
are.
too, but
Arlene maybe can bring you?
yeah,
Okay,
what
looks
part of
like I'm
the
getting
island are you on
messages in
again?
here. So Arlene, I got options. So thank you.
Okay,
everybody.
right on.
Jasmina, would you say hello?
Hi.
Yeah, nice to hear your voice.
Thank you. Yeah, it's good to be here.
Beautiful name.
Thank you.
You're signed up for both in person and virtual.
I couldn't decide, and then I couldn't remember what I had
You know,
put.
on
So I
that
was like,
particular day, you don't know if you're going to be virtual or in person.
I guess I'd like to attend in person, but I wasn't sure if there'd be room or not.
Yeah, there's room right now. I mean, I think at some point we'll cap it at 10 or 12 to tell you the truth, just to make sure we're all safe. But I'd love, it'd be great to see you. Anyway, I wanted to hear your voice. Nice to see you.
Okay, thank you. Nice to be here. Thank you for sharing all your wisdom with us.
Thank you. I don't know what to do with that one.
Before we sign off, can I just encourage everyone to reach out to their own personal circles and let them know what we're doing and invite them to join us at the Mindful Hawaii community meeting and or sign up for the Wisdom Seat training sessions that will start in October. Okay?
I want to say thank you, Jimmy. You're awesome. We love you. You're
I
amazing.
love all of you. You're the source of my energy. Thank you.
I want to thank Dean for his really heartfelt teachings today and sharing those beautiful stories and very touching stories.
Yes.
Thank you.
Oh, by the way, just for some, I had a wonderful conversation with a Karma Tomo, and I asked her the question. I said, you know, I've been reading some of the works of the Dalai Lama, and he's talking about a secular ethics, and so I thought she told me that, yeah, let's work on that project. And so running alongside of some of these other things that we'll be doing may be creating a platform where we can begin to talk about secular ethics, something that brings everybody together without things sinking into, you know, just their the usual religious corners. I mean, it won't deny that, but we'll have a central fundamental framework to work with each other on ethical things. So I think that should be interesting. I think that should run alongside, not pretty nicely with the Warrior project as well, I think.
The Karma Lekshe?
Yes. She's a wonderful person to talk to, actually.
Yeah.
I enjoyed my time with her. But
Oh,
she's already back in San Diego teaching a semester, I believe, at San Diego University, but she will be back later in the year. And maybe we can entice her to come and talk about different things at one of our meetings. That would be very, very good fun.
Great.
Oh, she got called a Shambhala warrior today.
Yeah, she is actually. And the other thing that I need to tell you is that we talked about, somebody used the word community a few times. And yesterday I attended a meeting that was called Ibasho, which was, it's a Japanese word. And this idea of building safe and communities where elders feel comfortable with themselves and with each other. And there were basically 8 principles. I don't want to go into the 8 principles, but building communities is something that Mindful Hawaii will have to take up as we go along. And I'm hoping to build another platform for that. And all of this is going to be all related, somehow connected. And Dean is going to advise on how we do that, right? It's going to be really fun in the next couple of years, I think. But in the meantime, we appreciate your commitment and turning out for these meetings, because being here, being present is so important to what we're doing. So aloha.
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 Bye.
Thank you, Dean, Jerome, Jimmy, Arlene.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you,
Nice to meet
everybody.
everyone.
On.
Bye.